now that you're 1 year older, I mean, do you think differently about what your yoga practice is going to be like starting this year?
Okay, well actually, that's interesting. An interview I did a while ago for a book that's coming out about sadhana, and the author of the book has interviewed a lot of different sort of, nationally known yoga teachers about what their sadhana is like. And when she initially contacted me, I emailed her back saying, you really don't want to talk to me about this book. I am not the person for this book, because I don't really do anything on a real, regular, regimented basis that someone would look at and say, that's sadhana, So I basically said, thank you, but no thank you. I'm really not the person for this book. Because I don't really think of what I do on a daily basis in terms of sadhana. And this has to do with what the original concept of sadhana was when I learned it ages ago, But that just intrigued her more, my response. And it made her want to talk to me even more. So we had this very long conversation. And she transcribed it, and she sent me the transcript, which was pretty much word for word what I had said. It was just a transcription. So what I got last week were a PDF of the page proofs of my chapter, which was quoting everything I said exactly as it had come out of my mouth in the transcription. And I was like, whoa, wait a minute. The way the words come out of my mouth when I'm speaking is not the way they need to be written on the page. This is like a basic rule of writing and grammar or anything else like that. I mean, I have access to the transcripts of everything I say in this room, in the course. And I'm using those as the basis for some of the stuff I'm writing now, but I have to turn that into a whole other kind of syntax and language, because written speech is not the same as spoken speech, and they're not. And what she did, she just dumped the transcript into this book, and it was like, you've got to let me fix this. Because she said, look, we can only do spelling and punctuation correction at this point. And I'm like, no, no. Really, go to your publisher, go to your editor, I don't care. If you don't let me fix this, I don't want to be in this book. And so we got the permission, and Lydia and I, actually, who's a very gifted editor, went over it with a fine-tooth comb, and we did a lot of rearranging and improving and, taking out of repetitions and all of that. But essentially what I was saying in the chapter, and so this has been in my mind because we've been going through this material, and it relates to the question you asked, is that my original introduction to the concept of sadhana came in the context of my original yoga teacher training, which was with Shivananda. This is back in 1979. And in that organization, because they're following the teachings of Swami Shivananda, okay, there's these two major collections of his writings. One is called Bliss Divine, books about that thick, and the other is called Sadhana, which is about that thick. And in this book, Sadhana, he has collected everything that has ever been done since the dawn of history in India by way of spiritual practice. And all of the rules and all of the practices and all of the guidelines for spiritual living are in there. And if you were to read this book and accept that this is what sadhana is and this is what you should be doing to be a spiritual person, perhaps you'd have the same experience I did. You'd be absolutely, completely overwhelmed and completely discouragaged. Because you would have time for nothing else. Literally. You would have no hours in the day to hold down a job or even go to the bathroom. Right. And so the idea of sadhana as this overwhelming commitment to doing what it takes to be spiritual was sort of shoved into my brain at an early stage. And it took many, many years for me to understand that the word itself really just means a means to accomplishing something. It's most often used as the means to accomplishing a spiritual life or something like that. But just the word itself is a means to accomplish something. And my early years when I did a lot of asana and a lot of breathing and a lot of sitting and a lot of meditation and a lot of chanting and a lot of teaching of how to do all of that to other people in that context, because I was with the ashram and I was a swami and all that stuff. I was very young. I was 19 when I started practicing yoga, and I was 21 when I learned to be a teacher. It got in my bones, in a certain way, developmentally. It really got deep. And what started happening as I got older was I was really less interested in doing, a routine every day. And I just couldn't really bring myself to do that. I was more involved in learning all the things I was learning how to do the hands-on work, the body work with people, and learning about anatomy and learning to teach the stuff that I'm teaching now. And it took me a long time to stop feeling guilty about that. To even get to the point where I could admit that to other people. It's like, what kind of yoga teacher are you? You're not on the mat every day? You're a phony or something. And that's what I was telling myself mostly. I don't think anyone else said that. They might have thought it. But I was thinking it. And when I look back on it now, having been doing this for so long, it's interesting. Have you read Outliers, Gladwell's latest book? Sort of the main thing people extracted from the book was something he mentioned right at the beginning, which was this 10,000 hour rule about gaining mastery over something. Have you heard this? Apparently, there's kind of a threshold of 10,000 hours being the minimum time commitment it takes to really master something, And it got me thinking, so I just did an informal conservative calculation in my head of how many hours I have spent, number one, with my hands inside other people's breathing mechanism. In other words, doing the table work that I do, right? And conservatively, I came up with 20,000 hours. Conservative. It's probably more. And then I started thinking, how many hours have I spent doing this? In front of groups of people, teaching, workshops, courses, all of that. That's another 20,000 hours, right? Which if you think about it, if you put in a 40-hour work week, right? You can do the math. Times that by 50, if you're doing that like every, 40 hours times, what is that? Is that 2,000 hours a year? Am I doing the math right? Right? And you do that for 20 years. I've been doing it for 33 years, right? Now, if that's not a means to accomplishing something, I don't know what the hell is. So this was my response to her in the question about what's your sadhana? And yes, do I do asana? Yeah, on an as-needed basis. If I feel myself crunching up, or if I feel my asymmetries taking over and getting me out of whack, yeah, I'll throw down the mat and do stuff and do this sitting and the breathing and all that stuff. But it's more like on an as-needed basis, because number one, this stuff has been in my bones for so long, and number two, if I wasn't physically aware of how I was positioning my body and staying balanced when I'm doing table work with people, when I'm doing my job, I would be so fucked by now. Seriously. So, and I have an advantage over other people that do body work, I think, because I started with the yoga. I have a lot of clients that are other body workers, and they get all messed up from doing this is something you got to watch when you're starting to practice. You know this, how important body positioning is and body mechanics, right? So, if I'm not doing something like my yoga, like my breathing, all the time, when I'm doing my sadhana, which is my job, then either I'm doing it all the time or I'm not doing it at all, basically, is what I'm saying. But it's more than that. It's how I relate to people. It's how I relate to the people around me. It's how I keep my ego in check. It's how I make sure that I apologize when I'm being an asshole. Right, Sarah? You were at that meeting where I was being an asshole, and wow, I'm sorry. I had to go to everyone who's at the meeting and say, that was wrong, That's sadhana, So at the age of 54, how have things changed? I'm more comfortable with the way it looks and less trying to get it to look the way I was told it should or the way anyone else thinks it should. Because at this point, I just don't give a shit, frankly. So I'm at that blessed stage of life where I really don't care what anyone thinks. You know, so there you have it. Thanks for asking. All right. I think that's it. I think we're done here. Okay. All right.